Have you read the Stephen King novel, The Running Man? Do you think that the 1987 movie adaptation of this novel would have been better if it were more accurate to the novel? What were the different themes of the 1987 film, the 2025 film, and the original novel? These and more questions will be explored in this episode of Back Look Cinema, the podcast. You cold-hearted bastard! I'll tell you what I think of it. I live to see you eat that contract, but I hope you leave enough room for my fist, because I'm going to ram it into your stomach and break your goddamn spine! Ah! Greetings! Happy New Year! My name is Zoe. It's spelled Z-O or Z to the O for those of you outside of the U.S. Welcome back, friends. This is the 208th episode of Back Look Cinema, the podcast, where we take a look back at the movies of yesteryear, especially the movies of the latter half of the last millennium. If you like what you're about to hear, then please tell your family, tell your friends, and tell that man who's running for his life and his family on the world's most watched game show about Back Look Cinema. This is going to be a different episode because instead of examining a single movie, I'm going to compare two movies and the novel that they're adapted from. If you haven't guessed by the quote I used in the beginning, I'm going to be talking about the original novel by Stephen King, writing as Richard Bachman, called The Running Man, the 1987 adaptation directed by Paul Michael Glaser, and the new 2025 adaptation by Edgar Wright. I'm also going to be spoiling the book and the movie, so if you don't want to be spoiled on either the book or the new movie, then you'll probably want to skip this episode. This isn't exactly a review, but a comparison of the three versions of the story. I originally covered Paul Michael Glaser's adaptation of The Running Man way back in episode 86 with Shane Rogers of Midnight Facts for Insomniacs. It's one of my favorite movies, and I think one of Arnold Schwarzenegger's best films. It's funny, it's campy, it's got fantastic action. It embodies 80s action sci-fi movies like few other movies do. It's action movie meets pro wrestling in the best possible way. When I saw that there was going to be a new adaptation of Stephen King's classic, I immediately got excited. Unlike a lot of my peers, I don't have any real problems with remakes, sequels, prequels, or new adaptations. Because at the end of the day, I'm just looking for a good story to entertain me. I like to see new versions of old stories because I think it's interesting to see how new filmmakers will craft a familiar story for new audiences. This is the second new adaptation of a story that featured Arnold Schwarzenegger that I'm familiar with. The first was Total Recall, directed by Len Wiseman and starring Colin Farrell. I didn't really like that version, mainly because I found it convoluted and confusing. I was looking forward to Edgar Wright's The Running Man because I've heard it was going to be a more faithful adaptation to the original story. Realizing that I never read the original, I decided to check it out before I saw the movie. I heard that it was darker, even more dystopian, and much less campy, and that the 1984 film wildly deviates from the original. The version of the novel that I checked out was an audiobook published in 2016 and expertly narrated by Kevin Kennerly. This version had a foreword by Stephen King on the importance of Richard Bachman. What I heard was that because King was so successful early in his career, he wanted to write under a pen name in order to see if people were buying his books because of his name, or were they buying his books because people really enjoy his stories. According to the foreword, King also wanted to explore the darker parts of his own nature. The more he wrote as Bachman, the more real Bachman became. To Stephen King, Richard Bachman wasn't just a name. He was a fully fleshed out human being living in his modest New Hampshire home. Bachman was filled with low rage, sexual frustration, crazy good humor, and simmering despair. Bachman's books would say the things that King could not say. To write as Bachman, King would have to reach in a place inside himself where the rain is pretty much constant, the shadows are always long, and the woods are full of monsters. The characters in Bachman's stories were pessimistic, with an edge of despair, and somewhat unlikable. They might have even been described as anti-heroes who would suffer grim endings. Interestingly, when reading the main character of The Running Man, I did find him a little distasteful. His demeanor was just a little bit off. I didn't know if it was because the foreword of the novel suggested that I shouldn't like him, or if it was because I genuinely didn't like him. After reading the book, I wondered if the new movie would be brave enough to follow through with the original ending. This is Hollywood, so of course they didn't, but I'm not sure that it would have been a better movie if they had. Naturally, the differences between the original story and the Glaser adaptation with Schwarzenegger was stark. They're different in tone, themes, and the stories deviate almost immediately. The main theme of a dystopian future where powerful corporations control the government is still in there, all three versions. This is a cautionary tale about allowing corporations to get too big and powerful. This is why we have antitrust laws. This is why our government is supposed to heavily regulate monopolies. Unfortunately, for a long time, our policymakers seem to have abandoned their responsibility to ordinary people to protect consumers from overreaching corporations. This is exactly the thing The Running Man was warning against. And it seems that, as recent events have proven, that's exactly where we're headed. Regarding Glaser's The Running Man and the novel, the book and the movie have only a couple of original characters, Ben Richards and Dan Killian. Although in the film, Killian is actually a merger of two characters, the host of the show, Bobby Thompson, and the producer, Dan Killian. Schwarzenegger plays Ben Richards, a respected government law enforcement officer who is wrongly accused of mass murder and was, quote-unquote, convicted to participate in a deadly game show called The Running Man. He has to run a course to get to the finish line before the hunters who run after him and find him. If they find him, they kill him. Although the audience and home viewers can make bets on which of the hunters will kill Richards, they don't actually participate in the game itself. Richards is sent to an arena that takes up several city blocks, along with a couple of other contestants who all attempt to fend off the hunters with names like Fireball, Dynamo, Buzzsaw, and Sub-Zero. Each of these guys are fantastically dressed with weapons to match their stage names. They embody a gimmick much like pro wrestlers. While on the run, Richards encounters resistance fighters who want to expose the lies being spread by the TV network. He also proves to be an effective player of the game as he kills off his hunters one by one, and often with a classically corny Arnold one-liner. Richards is so effective that Killian reaches out to offer Richards a job offer as a hunter. Richards' counter was to offer to break Killian's spine. During his time on the run, Richards and some of the surviving contestants are assisted by freedom fighters who work to take down the TV network and the fascist government. Eventually, Richards and the freedom fighters make it back to the network to expose the lies, and Richards gets his revenge on Killian. The audience cheers. The theater audience, because this is what we paid for. The book is almost totally different. Ben Richards is a regular guy struggling to support his family. He's unable to find work because he's been blacklisted, and his wife resorts to sex work to make ends meet. His daughter is sick, and his wife can barely afford the medication to keep her alive. He does what a lot of desperate people do in these times. He volunteers to be a contestant on one of the corporate TV giants' deadly game shows like Run for Your Guns, Dig Your Grave, or How Hot Can You Take It? Being in relatively good shape, due to working manual labor most of his life, Ben is confident that he could survive these games. But because contestants don't get to choose their games, he's selected for the Running Man, the deadliest and most popular game on the network. Contestants on the Running Man get special treatment, mainly to get them to sign the contract and participate in the game. They get a cash advance up front, which Richards quickly forwards to his wife.
Would you like to be on The Running Man? The rules are simple. Run throughout the entire world for 30 days. You get $100 for each hour you survive. If you survive the whole 30 days, you get the grand prize of $1 million. The catch is that every few days you will have to mail in video messages to the show. If you fail to mail in these videos before the deadline, you instantly lose. You're also being hunted by a cadre of professional paramilitary troopers called hunters. But because you're out in the world, anyone who spots you can kill you for a cash reward. The only plus side to this is that you win a $100 bonus for every hunter or law enforcement officer that you kill. There's no reward for killing civilians. No one has ever won the Running Man. The most successful runner lasted for less than 8 days.
How the game was portrayed is the main difference between the novel and the first film, because in the first film, not just anyone could kill you, and the contestants were confined in the arena. They didn't have to mail tapes in, and the game is only expected to last a few hours. In the novel, Richards is free to go wherever he chooses to stay alive. He could use whatever tactics he thought was necessary. He could use disguises, check in hotels under fake IDs. He hid in sewers or abandoned homes, all while trying not to get noticed by strangers who could turn him in or try to kill him themselves. That's right. In the book, regular people can kill you or turn you in and are incentivized by cash prizes. And being that this was the most popular show in the world and your picture was posted everywhere, the likelihood that you as a contestant would be recognized would be extremely high. Also, hunters aren't a big feature in the book. The story is focused on Richards, his journey, and the people he meets along the way. But the leader of the hunters, Evan McCone, is mentioned often as a kind of boogeyman and is part of the climax of the novel. An essential part of the game is that the contestants have to send in self-recordings to the studio using special studio mailboxes. As they run, they carry a recording device and dozens of tapes that they have to record and send in every few days on a predetermined schedule. If they fail to send in the recordings, then the game is forfeit. But the hunters will continue to seek them out until they're killed. This is a huge difference between the 80s film The Running Man and the novel. It adds tension to the story because it's kind of a ridiculous thing to do, to mail in videotapes while you're running for your life. The recordings that Richards is forced to send are a lot like the confessionals on most reality TV shows. This is interesting because it seems to predict the rise of modern reality TV, because the novel was published in 1982, and the reality TV that follows the format of the participants in the show filming confessionals seems to start with the real world in 1992. Or we can wind it back to 1989 with the popular Cops TV series. At first, Richard says little, but realized that he could expose the lies told by the network. Unfortunately, the tapes that he sends are dubbed over by a voice actor that make him appear more sinister and eviler than he really is. The tapes are doctored to encourage people to look for him and turn him in. Along the way, he meets up with a loose resistance network that agreed to help him get around by way of a few safe houses. But these safe houses are nowhere near the organized armed resistance band in the Schwarzenegger movie. They help Richards because he's a victim of the system that they're trying to expose. It's at one of these safe houses that Richards is betrayed, and it's one of the most interesting differences between the book and the new Edgar Wright film. In the book, this safe house is the home of a guy named Elton Paracas. Elton helps to hide out Richards for a few days, presumably to set things up so that Richards can move on to the next safe house. Elton lives with his crazy elderly mother who eventually recognizes Richards and calls the police. In the movie, Richards hides out in Elton's house with his crazy mother. Elton's mother recognizes Richards and threatens to activate an alarm that would call the hunters. At first, Elton tries to stop his mother from activating the alarm. But in a tense and suspenseful moment, Elton activates the alarm himself. His home is fully booby-trapped, and he intends to lure the hunters inside for a glorious battle inside his deadly home. Because in the film, Elton is a little crazy himself. Back to the book. Elton and Richards try to escape in Elton's car, while being pursued by the hunters and law enforcement. Elton is shot, forcing Richards to drive from an awkward position. They manage to find a nook where they're hidden from the hunters, but the car becomes disabled. Elton dies from his gunshot wound, and Richards' leg is injured during the chase, but he's able to get away. Another difference between the 80s film and the novel is that Richards has a general cloud of paranoia about him the entire time. While in the film, Schwarzenegger's Richards was heroic and confident, the book describes the dreams that Richards had. He had dreams of those who helped him being tortured, and he saw the other two contestants that went out with him had been killed by hunters or civilians. His paranoia ramps up after his recent escape, and he sees how the network twisted his words in the videos that he mails back to them. After a couple of days of hiding out, he makes the rash decision to take a motorist as hostage with a gun that he had acquired in his recent adventures. At this point, I'm not sure what Richards' ultimate plan was. Though he desperately wanted to survive and secure a future for his wife and daughter, it seems that at this point, he had to believe that deep down, he had no chance of winning the game. No one has ever won the grand prize in The Running Man. The person who he carjacks is a young upper-middle-class woman named Amelia Williams. She feels for her life because he's acting like the criminal that the network said that he was, because she watches The Running Man just like everyone else. Richards convinces her that everything that she saw on the show was a lie and that he was just trying to win money so that his family could survive. He even disarms himself to get her to help him willingly. Seeing his sincerity, Amelia agrees to help. He concocts a plan to have her drive him to an airport, and he causes enough commotion to get the network's attention. He also disguises Amelia's hand purse as an extremely powerful explosive. Since the network knows his general direction, they arrange a checkpoint ahead of him. At the checkpoint, Richards and Amelia are confronted with police, hunters, and the chief hunter himself, Evan McCone. Richard uses his fake bomb to demand a plane. Since the bomb is supposed to be powerful enough to take out a large area and there's no way to verify that the bomb was real, the network acquiesces to Richard's demand. Richards takes pretend hostage Amelia and for real hostage McCone onto the plane. At this point, Richards has survived the game longer than any other contestant, 8 days and 20 hours. On just hours of survival alone, Richards earned his family $19,700. On the plane, Richards suspects that the pilot, co-pilot, and navigator are all hunters, and they explain to him how the plane could basically fly itself. Richards ordered the pilots to fly over populated cities to avoid being shot down by surface-to-air missiles by the network. At this point, his plan is still unclear to me because the plane can't stay in the air indefinitely. At some point, Killian calls Richards and offers him a job as a hunter. Killian claims to be super impressed with Richards' performance and that he's become a fan favorite. What Killian doesn't tell Richards is that there is indeed a groundswell of support from the lower classes for Richards and that his survival encourages them to rise in rebellion against their suppressors and reject the constant flow of entertainment that's meant to nullify them. Richards is skeptical, and so is McCone. McCone wants to kill Richards and doubt that the bomb is real. Killian has McCone restrained and confined to keep McCone from killing Richards and continues his offer to Richards. He lets Richards know that the network knows that the bomb is fake and that Richards' family was murdered by hoodlums who broke into their apartment. Killian suggests that Richards has nothing else to live for. He might as well be a hunter. Richards isn't sure that he believes Killian, but he accepts the offer. Now that he's a network team member, he's allowed to wander the plane without suspicion. Using this freedom, he gets hold of a gun and kills the crew. He gets a parachute for Amelia and gets her out of the plane. He has a final fight with McCone and kills him. He uses what he learned from the pilots to order the plane to fly to the network tower. Ben Richards and Dan Killian die in a fiery explosion. It's a dark ending that is typical of the Richard Bachman books. It offers a sense of finality that is often absent in the books attributed to Stephen King. It's not an ending that's typical of Hollywood. In most Hollywood films, the hero has to survive, or at least offer a noble sacrifice. There's no sacrifice here. Here, there's only vengeance. In the recent 2025 movie by Edgar Wright, I found that I enjoyed it because of how faithful the adaptation was, irrespective of the movie ending. There aren't a lot of major differences between the book and the movie. The themes are more closely aligned between this film and the book than the Paul Glaser film and the book. There's a very strong theme of how television, known in the book as Free V, is expressly designed to dumb down the populace and for the people to accept their oppression. Free V is presumably free so people have an endless and costless access to entertainment, no longer burdened with payments to cable, streaming, or internet access. This theme doesn't seem to be as strong in the Schwarzenegger movie. Also, there is a focus on family that's missing from the 80s film, where Ben acts the way he does because he's just a noble and good guy, where Ben in the novel and the new film is doing everything for the love of his family. But Ben isn't absent of morality. It's unclear why Ben was blacklisted in the book, but in the movie, he was blacklisted for helping out a fellow worker and not following strict company protocols. In the film, they show flashes of Ben helping his co-workers at various jobs that showcased his strength, integrity, and character. He's often saving the lives of others doing dangerous work, and it's one of these instances, or perhaps because of all of these instances, that he was blacklisted. I believe that Ben was fleshed out in this way to make him more of a noble person for the film and engendered positive feelings for him from moviegoers. What I really enjoyed were the major events in the movie that were featured in the books. There's the 12-hour head start that Richard uses to go to a friend for disguises and fake IDs. The trips to cities across the country to evade capture. The hotel that Richards accidentally blew up while he was evading capture from the hunters and police. The help and the characters that Ben met along the way, although they were changed for the film. For example, there are the Throckmorton family who helps Richards. In the book, they just help him because they understand his plight. But in the movie, the older brother, Bradley, is actually part of an underground resistance that air pirate broadcasts to inform the public of the actual dubious actions of the network and the government and to try to incite the public to action. Bradley helped Richards get to his friend Elton. In the novel, Elton is morbidly obese, is relatively sane, and wants to avoid confrontation at all costs. In the movie, he's played by Michael Cera, who is a slightly crazy man, who's on a mission to spread the message of freedom from oppression with his pamphlets and is thrilled with the opportunity to have a shootout with law enforcement. The most important difference in characters is Chief Hunter Evan McCone. In the book, this character isn't really fleshed out, but in the movie, it's revealed that he was, and still remained, at that time, the longest surviving contestant of The Running Man. He had taken the deal that Killian offered Richards. The ending of the movie was a significant difference and a little more complex, with the film paying homage to but avoiding the actual ending of the book. Richards becomes something of a folk hero, with the audiences shouting and carrying signs that read, "Richards lives." Richards survived long enough to kill Killian face to face and vanishes into the crowd. It's even ambiguous about whether or not Richards' family lives. Earlier, while on the plane, Killian shows Richards a video of his family being killed by hunters, but later, at the end of the film, we see his wife and daughter shopping for food. The movie is much more optimistic than the book is, but this is normal for film. Today's audiences aren't really prepped for tragedies, not even in a horror movie. In times like these, a message of hopelessness isn't something that audiences regularly look for. A book can be pessimistic and tragic because it is allowed to expound on story, plot, and character development. It's allowed to build a world filled with complex characters and situations. A book can give you enough optimism within the confines of its pages and ultimately give you a tragic and pessimistic ending. These are the differences between the novel, the 1987 adaptation, and the 2025 adaptation. And if I'm going to pick a winner, it has to be the Running Man 1987 adaptation. I like that way better than I liked either the novel or the new film. It caught me when I was very young. I was very enthralled and enthusiastic about that movie. And even now when I watch it, I truly enjoy it. And Arnold Schwarzenegger is really alive in that movie. I don't know how else to say it. and I think that the novel was really cool. Although it is kind of a downer, and I really enjoyed the new 2025 movie because of how faithful it was to the novel, and because it was slick. It was a slick action movie with a lot of suspenseful moments. It really worked on me, and I really enjoyed it. And I don't understand why it wasn't more successful. But I am glad that I was able to experience this in the theater, and I thought it was really cool. And those were the differences that I found. There are probably more differences that I missed or I kind of skimmed over. If you're familiar with the novel and you've seen the new movie, are there any differences that I missed that you would have wanted me to talk about or that you want to talk about? Let me know in the comments or drop me an email. I'll leave my email later on. The movie wasn't brave enough to have an ending that the book presents, and I didn't expect it to. Instead, Edgar Wright chose to be more ambiguous. Is the Richards family alive or were they killed by the hunters? Is Ben Richards still alive? Will Killian's death really have any meaningful change? I invite you to watch the movie and draw your own conclusions. Unfortunately, this film didn't do well at the box office, but it actually has pretty decent ratings. On Rotten Tomatoes, critics has it at 63% and the audience score is 78%. IMDb Reviews has it at 6.4 out of 10. Troy Ribeiro from the Free Press Journal of India wrote, "The Running Man hurdles forward on ambition and adrenaline. Its critique of media control gleamed beneath Wright's hypnotic spectacle, visually arresting but emotionally distant. It dazzles more than it disturbs." I suppose how I can see somebody viewing the film that way, but I felt emotionally invested. So, or maybe it could be that Ben Richards' character in this movie was a little rough around the edges. Even though he was more likable than he was in the book, he's still kind of hard to like in the film. But it was still compelling. Peter von der Haar from the Houston Press wrote, "The movie's utter cop-out of an ending and ham-fisted credits buzzwords now make me doubt if the director of Hot Fuzz really understands satire as much as I previously thought. I don't think this film was meant to be satire. I think that this film was meant to be an action thriller and is supposed to be taken seriously. There are some satirical elements, but I think it leans harder on a more serious note. So I don't think it has a problem with satire. Louisa Moore from Screen Zealots wrote, "A wildly entertaining Stephen King adaptation and standout casting, slick visuals, thrilling action, and a smart modern spin." I think I agree wholeheartedly with Miss Louisa Moore. And then we have Dennis Harvey from 48 Hills. He wrote, "It reveals Wright doesn't have a natural flair for staging action. And while the anti-fascistical political jabs are point on, they're also done in broad strokes that ultimately sink beneath the general mechanics of a generic mall flick." I don't know if I entirely agree with that statement, but I can understand how somebody might say that. Finally, The Running Man by Richard Bachman is still in print and is available wherever books are sold or at your local library, and is available as an audiobook. The Running Man, 1987, is, as of this recording, available on Paramount Plus and MGM Plus. The Running Man 2025 is available to rent or to buy, either video on demand or on Blu-ray at your nearest big box retailer. For the rest of the month of January, I'm going to focus on some animation that I loved when I was younger. There was a movie that I watched when I was younger that I was fascinated by, and I've only seen once. And my effort to find it again has been frustrated because there are so many versions of it that I'm not sure which of these movies was actually the one I watched. But I think I found it. So join me next time and we'll discuss the classic anime, Vampire Hunter D. You can follow us on Blue Sky Threads, TikTok, Instagram, and sometimes Twitter. Please contact us with any questions, comments, or suggestions at fanmail@backwardscinema.com. Please rate and review on your favorite podcast app. And if you're listening on YouTube, please like or subscribe or leave a comment below. I'd love to hear from you. One last time, if you like this show, then please help us grow by spreading the word about Backlit Cinema, the podcast. Believe me, it matters. I've been Zoe Richardson. Be safe, share a movie from yesteryear with your family, hug your loved ones, and if you're gonna be anything, be outstanding.